Your father was a publisher,
Yes.
a
Hmm.
essayist, a
Hmm.
founder of the first Black bookshop in UK, considered to be one of the most important activists in Black, British, and Caribbean history.
Yes, right.
The elder statesman of British Black community, John LaRose.
Yeah.
So I'm going to now welcome you, Michael LaRose, the son
Hmm.
of John LaRose.
That's right.
And can I ask you the first question? Do you mind?
Yeah.
Can you give us a brief history of your dad's legacy?
The dad's legacy is part of a tradition of radical movements coming from the Caribbean, going way back to slavery,
Mhm.
of people who are standing up for social justice, um, and standing up for what is right in the world, and using the tools they have, either their intelligence, the things they can do, to help the mass of the population progress and go forward. So the first Black publishing house in Britain, and then the first book selling bookshop in Britain was New Beacon.
Mhm.
And that was because uh, he felt, coming from the Caribbean and political and cultural activity there,
Yeah.
that making our own books and publishing our own books about our history, our art, and culture was really important. And he thought that politics and culture together was an important tool for our progress. So, having a publishing company, publishing books, was also a way of putting forward the information and knowledge from one generation to the next generation. And also by book selling, you're making available information and knowledge to the population about their history, their culture, and their past struggles.
And also, it's also left for the next generation to read, right? And to understand. And it
That's
can be
right.
passed on to other generations. Okay.
That's right.
Oh, that's very interesting. So, do you mind me asking you the second question? What do you think powered your father's fight for social justice?
As I explained earlier, um, he and many others were parts of movements that
Mm,
continued struggle from previous movements.
mm,
So he was involved with the anti-colonial struggle, tried to get the British out of the Caribbean.
mhm.
In his particular case, Trinidad and Tobago. He used his skills because he could speak Spanish and French as well as English to connect with all the other islands to discuss how to go forward and how to deal with the questions of independence. The second thing, going back a few steps, was a lot of Caribbean people were part of the Pan African movement,
Okay.
which met in London, in Manchester, to to see how we could get the European empires out of Africa, especially. And that Pan African movement included people like George Padmore and Dubois, and of course Kwame Nkrumah, who became the first independent African country, or who won their independence, not independent Africa, but the African country that won its independence.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you go a step back again, there was the 1930s insurrections all over the Caribbean of workers wanting to get better wages.
Mm,
And that turned into riots all up and down the Caribbean. And after that, people started to organize and form trade unions. And through the trade unions, they became stronger and were able to take part in the anti colonial struggle. Parallel to that was uh, intellectuals, people uh, who studied um, all the aspects of history and literature uh, that the West could offer, started to look at the Caribbean and say, "But we produce things just as good as everywhere else." And to validate that, uh, there was a group in Trinidad called the Beacon, and they included a guy called CLR James, a guy called Alfred Mendez, Ralph de Boissier, and others. And they started writing about our poetry, our novels, our folk culture, and validating that. And that's what New Beacon is named after, that earlier Beacon magazine period. So you see, nothing comes from nowhere. We come from a tradition, yes? And that is how his education and his background helped him to decide what he wanted to do with his life.
So basically, what I got from that is that what helped him decide what he wants to do with his life is things that he's experienced, knowledge that's been passed down, and things that he's been around, and just maybe tradition and generations, basically.
Yes, but you have to take the decision to stand up for social justice.
Yeah, you have to have some power and fight in you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, not everyone can do that.
Not everyone could do that, but it helps if you have a movement of people around you, people who think the same, and unify to go forward.
Yep. Yeah, that's true. It reminds me of, there's a saying, it says, you're stronger together than on your own.
That's right.
No, that's very true. And that leads us to the third question. It said, which of your dad's characteristics have truly you've come to admire, and why?
That's a kind of difficult question. I think his calmness under pressure and his ability not to buckle when things are going bad, but to sit down, work it out, meet with other people, and try and find a solution. I think they're the main ones.
Wow. Those are important things, because especially if you're running a movement, you have to be able to manage pressure and act accordingly. Because I know that a lot of people higher up in politics, they like to see people crack under pressure and get them to do things that they shouldn't do. So that's very important. Even in everyday life, to be able to be calm and get through and navigate, that's a very important trait. It's very important. It even made me think a bit what I can do better with myself. Okay, so that would lead us to the fourth question. It says, when researching your dad, there was a little mention of the Black Parents Movement. Could you tell us what that was?
Yes. In 1975, I think it was, I was at school, at Station School in Hornsey, along with Selena's dad and my brother, Keith.
Oh.
Selena's dad is called Cliff McDaniel.
Yeah.
And he was a schoolboy at Station School. And at Station School, there was the girls' school, Hornsey School, not far away.
Yeah.
And the black kids used to meet, the girls and boys, at the bottom of the road on Western Park, and, hang out, lime, talk to each other, all that kind of stuff. And police vans from Hornsey Police Station would patrol the area like sharks and try and intimidate these young black students, and sometimes give them verbal racial harassment, sometimes physical harassment. And one of these verbal harassments turned into them trying to arrest Cliff McDaniel. They held him, they beat him up on the street, they threw him in the van, beat him up in the van, took him to the police station and beat him up there. And my brother called me, and we both called my dad to see what we could do. Being a long-time activist, he said, first of all, there has to be information about what happened, and you have to take statements from anybody who saw what happened immediately, and we have to make a complaint to the local police station. We had to contact Cliff's mom and dad to tell them what we knew and what happened, and say that we would form a campaign for his innocence. He got released by the police, but got charged with assaulting police, although they assaulted him. when that activity of these young people and these parents getting together to form an organization to deal with Cliff's case, that formed the Black Parents Movement and the Black Youth Movement. The Black Youth Movement were basically all of Cliff's friends in both schools and other schools and his family. And the Black Parents Movement were people, were parents very concerned about how Cliff was treated, including centrally Cliff's mum and dad. The people that came into these organizations came from organizations we had formed before in the Black Supplementary School. And the two schools that were involved were the George Padmore Supplementary School and the Albertina Sylvester Supplementary Schools. These were different age schools, that's why they got different names. The Albertina Sylvester is named after one of the parents who was very active in forming the school. She came from Grenada and was again very active in the Black Parents Movement. So that's how the Black Parents Movement was formed. And then the Black Youth Movement did, first of all, just to tell you what happened with Cliff's case. He was found guilty the first time, and we wouldn't accept that. And with our lawyers and the campaign, that is, we took our own statements, we were confident we could win the case, and we went to appeal and we won it. And then we had a demonstration from Hornsey into Finsbury Park of all the people who were involved in the campaign and knew about the campaign, and also asking for one of the police or some of the policemen to be reprimanded or prosecuted themselves. One of them was a policeman called Ryan David, who was known to bully Black children in the area.
I think that's another perfect example of unity, because if you knew it and then your dad didn't call all of the people that he was around and working with, maybe the F wouldn't have been found not guilty in the end. And I feel like the statements, everything comes together as unity again and working together as a team and as a movement. So that is amazing.
Definitely.
Yeah, that is amazing. It's honorable, in fact, that you all worked together and created a movement to help one and what, without realizing you're helping so many others. Because I'm sure as you
after that case, after Cliff McDaniel's case and the way we organized, we didn't organize just collecting information. In the legal side, we had meetings of the campaigns with the legal people and saying, look, we know this very well, and you've got to follow our instructions. You just don't go off and make deals with the police or the court or anything like that. Because at that time, the courts, especially the magistrates' courts, were just a rubber stamp for the police, and they just wanted a guilty charge as quick as possible. But through those methods, and also we would tell the community about what was happening, we'd give out leaflets about the campaigns and ask the community to come to the court to witness what was happening and have demonstrations outside and pickets outside the court. That method we learned from an earlier case back in 1970 by the Mangrove Nine. And that we used to use for the Black Parents Movement and Black Youth Movement campaigns. There were lots of campaigns all over London and some outside in Bradford and Manchester.
Next question, it says, how do you think the Windrush generation impacted Britain?
Some people are not happy with the term Windrush because it means that we just came here in 1948. That's not true. We've been here since Roman times and before. So that was always the thing you have to say when people use the term Windrush. But if we're talking about post-war emigration from the Caribbean to London or to Britain, we can say that my father used to call those people, which included himself, the heroic generation.
I love it.
And the children of those people, he called the rebel generation. Right? That's because the heroic generation, because he felt that we came here as all kind of, from professional to laborers, we're all squeezed into a laborer situation. And they face so much racism, so much violence against them, but they continued, they carried on. They found ways of raising money like Susu or Partner or Box. They found ways of buying their own houses when they couldn't get mortgages. They found ways of raising money through blues dances. They formed sound system parties, all kind of stuff. So they were really creative and didn't buckle down to the conditions they found in Britain, although all that was promised was never delivered. The rebel generation now were people who were not, who were on the whole, like myself. I came from the Caribbean as a young child, or people who were born here. They went to school with white kids and expected the same opportunities and possibilities that they had. But the school system was channeling us into just being menial workers alone. Yes, like they forced our parents. Our parents had no choice because they were new, but these rebel generation knew differently and were expecting the same opportunities as the whites, and had experienced racism, especially from the police, especially from the education system, and especially from housing and all the other services that in Britain. But they felt that, and also they were under pressure about their identity. The British state was not saying that these people were British. So, like the previous generation, they turned into themselves and made their own language, their own music, their own fashion. And that became the lead for everything in Britain after that, because they all followed everything. Our fashion, our music, our food has a big impression in Britain. But one of the most important things is we weren't going to take shit. And there were fights and riots up and down the country, especially after the New Cross fire in 1981, when the whole country went up. All over, all the major cities in the country went up. And the government had to make a decision: keep up the oppression or open all the doors and see what happens. Let's make a black middle class as quickly as possible, like we did in the Caribbean just before independence, so there are people who won't be rioting on the streets. And to a certain extent, that worked. That a lot of people got professional jobs after 81.
I think it was very interesting, the first thing that you said, because I actually never knew that some people don't like to be called the Windrush. They don't like to be put in that bracket. That stood out.
Yeah.
And
some people, the people on my side of the fence anyway. I wouldn't say there's a lot of people.
Could you repeat what you called them though? You said something.
I said that we didn't come to Britain with the Windrush.
Yeah.
We'd come before.
Yeah.
And there were two types of generations. That first generation, that my father called the heroic generation.
Yeah.
And then my generation, which is the children of that lot.
Yeah.
Who have a different experience of Britain, and he called us the rebel generation.
Yeah, I like that. I don't know why I liked it, but it makes sense. It makes so much sense. So that stood out to me as well. But once again, another thing of unity, like the Susu, the Partner, being able to buy houses. It's like that generation, that time, they made sense out of nonsense. They made sense out of the box that they was put into, and was able to break the box and make change. And that is
exactly that. Exactly. That's why he called them heroic generation.
Yeah.
What they faced, we haven't faced any previous generation, because they faced it and stood up to it.
That is amazing. And I feel like I wish my generation and the generations after us would have sense to fight with things like this instead of each other. I think that is what they need to be focusing on and working to unify and make positive change.
Yeah.
So hearing this has even encouraged me. So I love it. I love to hear this. It's so positive.
Well, one of the positive things you're doing is forming an organization around lupus.
Yeah.
That's a positive move,
Yeah.
and bringing in as much people as you can from around you. That as you start off with the people who are around you first, and then go out to other people and convince them to be part of this.
Yeah. And that will lead us to another question. It says, how do you, Michael, intend to continue your father's legacy?
Right. It's not such a personal thing. It's a legacy of a movement. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I told you that movement goes back to people having slave revolts during slavery in Africa, etc. Right? So that whole movement of resistance is what New Beacon and all the organizations that have formed around us have been doing for all these years.
Yeah.
It's within generation to generation. You have to make a decision. What am I going to do with my life for my generation about wanting change, right? And that is the kind of decision that I had to make maybe when I was 14, yeah, with all the people in that movement that my dad was
Yeah.
part of. I had to say, am I going to continue? Do I agree with this? And partly what we're talking about all the time is generational
Mm-hmm.
activity.
Yep.
So what you teach your children and what you teach your cousins and your family and whoever's around you is really important for them to understand and join you in whatever you're doing.
Yeah, that is so true. And I like the keyword generations because, like you said, what your dad did, it passed on generationally to you and it will pass on to the generations after you because you're going to continue to do it.
Yeah,
And I think that's so important.
yeah.
And finally, how would your dad want to be remembered?
Hmm. It's interesting. You know that there's a street named after him in Tottenham,
Yes.
La
Yeah.
Rose Lane. Um, he would not really have wanted that. Yes, he
Can
would.
I, can
He
I
was
ask
not.
why?
Huh?
Can I ask why?
He wouldn't think. He would think that's just superficial,
Mm.
and that's what we said when we were approached about the from Harringay Council. We
Yeah.
said, "Great, thank you," but he would want more than this, and so
Yes.
we asked for more than this.
Yeah.
We asked for the books about him being used in Harringay schools,
Okay.
an educational program. We
Mm.
asked for an exhibition on him, which we did in 2015, to be put up in Harringay at
Mm.
some point. And they suggested an educational bursary to help people go to university. And that's named after him as well.
Yeah.
So they agreed to all of that. And so we're happy.
Oh, that's wonderful. It's
we,
actually
we
wonderful.
weren't happy just the name. He would not have been happy just the name.
But then once again, that's you, all of you, your family coming together to present more than just the name. So it's like you've
Yeah,
gone the further step, like your dad and all of his other friends would be doing. It's not taking the first answer, it's going forth and asking for more,
yeah,
which a lot of people don't do. They settle with what they are given. And I think
yeah,
that
yeah. Yes,
that mm,
that's because we have uh, we have this idea that just superficial awards doesn't do anything. We want
yeah.
real progress. In 1991, we formed the George Padmore Institute, which was an archive of the struggle of African, Caribbean, and Asian people, African, Caribbean, and people of African, Caribbean, and Asian descent in Britain. All
Mm,
the struggles we're going through from before the 50s
yeah.
onwards, and that archive is based above the bookshop, and they are helping Harringay Council to put on the things that
Mm,
they promised.
no. And it's like what I've got from that is that it's not only a road named after him, he'll people will be able to be educated, not just about him, but about other things through his legacy,
Yeah,
basically. And that's something that I think from hearing about your dad, he would want. more than just a name on a
Exactly
road.
that.
It's to,
Exactly that.
yeah,
And that's why we asked for that. And that's why
yeah,
they have agreed to that.
yeah. No, that's amazing. That is honestly amazing. But that is all the questions, and I just want to say thank you for allowing me to question you, and thank you for answering with such knowledge
Mhm.
because you've taught me so much,
Okay.
and I appreciate it. Thank you, and it was lovely to meet you. In fact, an honor to meet you, and an honor to hear
Okay.
about you. So thank you so much.
Well, please come to the bookshop. There's
I bring
I'll send Selena our flyer
my.
Please.
because only if the community helps us and supports us
Yeah,
can we continue. We were formed in 1966, but doesn't matter. We've struggled ever since 1966, so it
Yeah.
is important that the community supports us.
definitely.
Yeah.
And I would just like to say, Michael, thank you so, 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 so much. It's, boy, it's funny. I was actually born in 1975, so you can imagine what kind of year Daddy had.
Yeah.
It's, it kind of gives me an understanding, even a little bit more of how he is in a certain
Yeah.
respect. And Daddy has always been, in my mind, a rebel without a cause. Now I actually realise he is a rebel
He
with
had
a
a
cause.
cause.
Yeah,
Yes, he had a cause. Yes.
definitely, definitely. And it also, I suppose, kind of explains my slightly rebellious behaviour sometimes as well. I definitely got that part from him. Your dad was a gentleman and a half, that I have to definitely say. Wow.
Thanks.
I'll definitely be coming down to New Beacon. I'll be bringing Kai with me, and
Okay.
probably my nephew and my niece if I can drag them as well.
That's very important. What we encourage
Definitely.
people to do is to bring, we talk to schools about bringing children to the bookshop just to touch and feel the books, but also see a bookshop like ours.
Absolutely.
Or,
Definitely
or,
needs to be done.
or to look at what we've got available. Because one of the things we do is approach the libraries and say, what kind of books do you have in your library? Because Black history is not Black history, it's British history,
Yep.
right?
Absolutely.
So everything should be there. And one of the reasons we started the supplementary school is for what they leave out in
Yeah.
education in
Absolutely. And they
Britain.
leave out a
Yeah.
lot. They do leave out a lot. It's an important job that you're doing, and thank you so much for continuing it. It's so easy
Thank you.
to get obscured in history, very, very easy. So for the fact that your family have been leading this charge for such a long time, from our generation to yours, thank you, and beyond. Absolutely,
Thank you.
absolutely. And it's funny, there's a lot of, I've always said it, for people like me of my generation, I am much more like the generation before yours. So I'm not of Daddy's generation. I'm of my grandparents' generation. I've always said it. I'm more like my grandmothers than I am my mum. And I think that, as you said, that fighter, that heroic spirit, a lot of us do have it. And we've learned to kind of stand firm in adversity, and it's nice to kind of get it from a slightly different perspective as to why that is. So again, thank you, and it makes me understand how I can deal with lupus the way I do as well,
Good.
you
Good.
know.
I'm happy to support it. I'm
Thank
happy to
you.
support what
Thank
you
you
do.
so,
Yeah.
so much.
And I hope it all goes well.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank you.
so much. We'll send
Take
you
care.
the details of that as well.
Yeah.
Listen, take care, my love. Thank you so much. Much
Take
appreciated.
care.
All right.
Bye
Good
bye.
evening.
Bye bye.
Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.